Hello everyone. Before starting the video, if you are new here, please support and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Let's start. Have you ever felt that the more deeply you think, the more disconnected you become from others? That the more you understand, the less people want to listen? This isn't just your imagination. Throughout history, society has been wary of deep thinkers, not because they are wrong, but because they see things others would rather ignore. History is full of examples. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, brilliant minds have been ridiculed, dismissed, or even persecuted, not due to a lack of intelligence, but because their ideas made people uncomfortable. The philosopher Schopenhauer once argued that intelligence can be a curse, isolating those who perceive reality too clearly. But why does this happen? Why does society push away those who think differently? The answer lies in human psychology. When we encounter someone physically stronger, we might admire their power. When we see someone wealthy, we may envy them but not feel personally attacked. However, intelligence works differently. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. Deep thinkers don't just introduce new ideas. They unintentionally highlight the limitations of those around them. This makes people uncomfortable. Even without saying a word, a deep thinker's presence alone can make others feel inadequate. Unlike wealth or strength, intelligence is tied to identity. People define themselves by their beliefs and understanding of the world. When someone challenges those beliefs with deeper insights, it can feel like a direct attack on their sense of self. Rather than being curious, people often become defensive, resisting intellectual discussions as a way to protect their egos. Have you ever tried to introduce a deep idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with silence or a quick change of subject? This isn't a coincidence, it's a psychological defense mechanism. When faced with complex thoughts, many people instinctively shut down rather than engage. Interestingly, research shows that confidence often matters more than intelligence in social settings. People are drawn to those who speak with certainty, even if their ideas are simplistic. This explains why charismatic but shallow figures gain more influence than nuanced thinkers who challenge mainstream ideas. History is full of examples: populist leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers who thrive by telling people what they want to hear. Meanwhile, those who question popular beliefs often struggle to find an audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more isolated they may become. Society doesn't just resist new ideas, it resists the people who introduce them. But is there scientific proof that intelligence can make people uncomfortable? Neuroscience suggests that when people feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the area responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In other words, encountering someone much more intelligent can trigger the same survival response as facing danger. This reaction is rooted in human evolution. Our ancestors survived not by being the smartest, but by being accepted within a group. Social harmony meant safety, while rejection often led to vulnerability. Because of this, our brains are wired to prioritize fitting in over intellectual depth. When a highly intelligent person disrupts group norms, it can feel like a threat to social stability. A 2021 Stanford study found that this rejection of deep thinkers is more pronounced in group settings. One-on-one, people are less threatened by intelligence. But in larger groups, the discomfort rises significantly. This happens because people don't just compare themselves to the intellectual, they also worry about how others perceive them in comparison. Several cognitive biases further explain why intelligence is often met with resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that people with limited understanding often overestimate their knowledge, while those who are highly intelligent tend to doubt themselves. This creates a disconnect. Those who know less are often the most confident, while those with deeper insights hesitate to assert themselves. Other biases also play a role. Status quo bias. People prefer familiar ideas over disruptive truths. Deep thinkers challenge this comfort. The backfire effect. When confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, people don't change their minds. They double down on their existing views. The modern digital world has only intensified this divide. Social media favors viral, emotionally charged content over deep, thoughtful discussions. Simplified messages spread faster than complex ideas, making it even harder for deep thinkers to gain acceptance in the mainstream. This is why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries often find themselves on the fringes of society, not because they want isolation, but because their insights challenge the way people see themselves and the world. The burden of intelligence. So what does this mean for deep thinkers? The rejection of intelligence isn't just social, it's biological, psychological, and cultural. It is built into human nature, reinforced by group dynamics, and magnified by modern technology. This doesn't mean deep thinkers should stop sharing their ideas, but it does mean they need to understand the forces working against them. But if society resists intelligence, what does it actually embrace? The answer lies in comfort, a world where predictability is preferred over truth. Schopenhauer and the Curse of Intelligence. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers in history, believed that intelligence is not a gift, but a curse. Unlike other thinkers who saw intelligence as the key to success, Schopenhauer argued that the smarter a person is, the more they will struggle to connect with society. But why? What makes intelligence such a burden? Schopenhauer's philosophy was built on a concept he called the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all human behavior. According to him, most people live their lives controlled by the will to live, meaning they seek pleasure, comfort, and survival above all else. However, highly intelligent people operate differently. Instead of blindly following instincts, they develop the will to truth, an insatiable desire to understand reality, even if it leads to discomfort. Regular people seek pleasure and avoid difficult truths. Deep thinkers seek truth, even if it leads to pain and isolation. The disconnect between deep thinkers and society. This creates a fundamental disconnect between intellectuals and the rest of society. Deep thinkers crave depth, but society favors simplicity. Most people prefer surface-level conversations, while deep thinkers crave meaningful discussions. This makes it difficult for them to engage in everyday interactions without feeling bored or disconnected. They see through lies and deception. Most social interactions involve small talk, status games, and polite dishonesty. Deep thinkers, who value truth over appearance, often struggle to participate in this. They recognize the futility of human desires. Schopenhauer saw desire and ambition as illusions. He believed that most people chase money, power, and relationships, but deep thinkers often question the very purpose of these pursuits. This makes them appear distant or indifferent to what excites the majority. This is why intelligent people often feel misunderstood, alienated, or even resented. Their mere presence forces others to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, and most people would rather avoid that. Schopenhauer compared intelligence to a heightened sense of awareness, a blessing that feels more like a curse. He wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." His reasoning was simple. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. The more aware you are of the world's flaws, the harder it is to find happiness in it. The more you think deeply, the lonelier you become. For Schopenhauer, happiness and intelligence were inversely related. He believed that ignorance, not wisdom, was the true key to happiness. This is why deep thinkers throughout history, like Blaise Pascal and Franz Kafka, have often struggled with depression, existential crises, and social isolation. Schopenhauer's advice for deep thinkers. Schopenhauer did not just diagnose the problem, he also offered solutions. He believed that while intelligence leads to loneliness, there are ways for deep thinkers to cope with their isolation, embrace solitude. Schopenhauer saw solitude not as a punishment, but as a privilege. He believed that deep thinkers should use their alone time for intellectual and creative pursuits, rather than seeking validation from society. Find like-minded individuals. Instead of trying to fit into mainstream society, Schopenhauer advised intelligent people to seek out those who think like them, whether through books, philosophy, or exclusive intellectual circles. Engage with the world wisely. He warned against blindly sharing deep insights with people who weren't ready for them. Instead, he suggested that thinkers observe society, learn its patterns, and choose their words carefully. His teachings serve as a guide for modern deep thinkers struggling with social rejection. While intelligence may lead to loneliness, it also grants freedom, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of life. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as a double-edged sword, a source of both power and pain. While it allows one to see reality more clearly, it also distances them from those who prefer illusions. Why society rejects deep thinkers. In the end, Schopenhauer's philosophy confirms what we already suspect. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they are wrong. They are rejected because they are right too soon. So if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this: you are not broken. You are simply seeing the world for what it really is. But does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to isolation? Or are there ways to navigate society while preserving intellectual depth? The truth is, society isn't built to embrace deep thinkers. It's built to maintain stability. Most people prefer comfort over truth. That's why shallow conversations, simple ideas, and repetitive content dominate social spaces. Why society prioritizes comfort over depth. But why is comfort prioritized over intellectual depth? Why does society resist change, even when that change leads to progress? The answer lies in human psychology and how institutions shape our thinking from an early age. At its core, the human brain craves certainty and predictability. The psychology behind society's rejection of deep thinkers' evolution has programmed us to avoid mental discomfort, a phenomenon psychologists call cognitive ease. Cognitive ease, the brain prefers simple, familiar information because it requires less mental energy to process. When an idea is complicated, nuanced, or unfamiliar, the brain perceives it as difficult and potentially dangerous. System justification theory. This explains why people defend the status quo even when it works against them. Instead of questioning authority or outdated beliefs, most people prefer to rationalize them because change feels too uncertain. Groupthink. People would rather conform to widely accepted beliefs than risk social rejection by challenging them. This is why the majority tends to reject intellectual dissent, even when it's based on truth. This deep psychological preference for comfort over complexity is why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists often struggle to gain mass acceptance, especially during their lifetimes. The digital age, simplicity over depth. Take a look at today's digital world. Who gets the most attention on social media? Not the intellectuals, but those who can reduce complex ideas into viral, feel-good sound bites. Thought-provoking discussions struggle to gain traction because depth takes time, while viral content is instant, emotional, and easy to digest. Algorithms reward engagement, and nothing engages people more than controversy, outrage, or humor, all of which often sideline rational intellectual discourse. Echo chambers develop where people are exposed only to information that reinforces their existing beliefs, making them resistant to new perspectives. In this environment, deep thinkers who challenge the mainstream narrative often find themselves ignored, misunderstood, or even attacked. The institutional rejection of intelligence. This rejection of deep thinking doesn't just happen online. It begins in the very institutions that shape our minds: schools, workplaces, and politics. Education system. Schools claim to value intelligence, but in reality, they reward obedience over independent thought. Students who memorize and regurgitate information succeed, while those who question or challenge authority are often labeled as troublemakers. Workplaces. The corporate world doesn't favor the most intelligent or innovative employees. It favors those who fit the culture and maintain the existing power structure. Politics. Leaders who make bold, unpopular statements rooted in logic often lose to those who simply tell people what they want to hear. This explains why the most celebrated intellectuals in history were outcast during their lifetimes. Their ideas were seen as disruptive rather than valuable. Society celebrates intelligence, but only when it's safe. Society claims to value intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking. But in reality, it only celebrates these qualities after they are safe and widely accepted. Consider these examples. Galileo was imprisoned for his discoveries, yet today we praise him as a scientific genius. Van Gogh died in poverty, yet his paintings are now worth millions. Nikola Tesla revolutionized energy, but lived and died in obscurity. Society does not embrace intelligence. It tolerates it only when it no longer poses a threat. When it challenges the norm, society only celebrates intelligence in hindsight, once it's no longer threatening. So if deep thinkers struggle to be accepted, what can they do? If you have ever felt misunderstood for thinking deeply, you are in good company. Throughout history, some of the most brilliant minds were not celebrated during their lifetimes. They were ridiculed, persecuted, or ignored. Their ideas were seen as dangerous, disruptive, or simply too difficult for society to accept at the time. These thinkers had one thing in common. They were ahead of their time, and because of that, they suffered for their wisdom. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, spent his life questioning commonly held beliefs. He challenged people to think critically, to examine their own ideas, and to embrace logic over blind tradition. But instead of being celebrated for his wisdom, he was put on trial for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His real crime? Encouraging people to think for themselves. Despite being given the option to escape, Socrates chose to drink poison rather than abandon his principles. His famous words before his death, "The unexamined life is not worth living," sent a clear message. Society fears those who challenge its core beliefs. Galileo's only crime was discovering the truth. When he proved that the earth revolves around the sun, he shattered centuries of religious dogma. The church, which held power through controlling knowledge, branded him a heretic. He was forced to publicly deny his own discoveries under threat of torture. Even though we now recognize him as one of history's greatest scientists, during his lifetime, he lived under house arrest, and his work was banned for nearly a century. Galileo's story proves that even the most undeniable truths will be rejected if they threaten the existing power structure. Friedrich Nietzsche's work was considered too radical, too unsettling. He argued that traditional morality was flawed, that society was built on comforting lies, and that true strength came from creating one's own values. At the time, these ideas were too much for people to handle. He was dismissed as insane, his works ignored or misunderstood. Yet today, Nietzsche's philosophy influences psychology, literature, and existentialism. His ideas on power, will, and morality now shape modern philosophy, proving that society often rejects deep thinkers in the present only to embrace them in the future. Nikola Tesla was a visionary. He dreamed of free energy for the world, wireless electricity, and technological advancements that could have revolutionized human civilization. But society, and more specifically those in power, saw his ideas as a threat. Industrialists like Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan profited from selling electricity, so Tesla's idea of free energy was shut down. Despite his genius, Tesla died alone in a small hotel room, forgotten and broke, while others built fortunes using his stolen ideas. His life is a perfect example of how society often rewards businessmen and marketers over true visionaries. Alan Turing's brilliance in cryptography played a crucial role in ending World War II. His work in breaking the Enigma code saved millions of lives and laid the foundation for modern computing and artificial intelligence. Yet instead of being celebrated, he was persecuted for his personal life. In 1952, he was subjected to chemical castration simply for being gay, a punishment that led to his tragic suicide at the age of 41. Today, he is honored as a hero, but during his lifetime, society cast him aside despite his extraordinary contributions. While most historical intellectuals were men, Hypatia of Alexandria was a rare exception. A philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, she defied the male-dominated intellectual world of ancient Rome. Her commitment to scientific reasoning and rational thought made her a target of religious authorities. In 415 AD, she was brutally murdered by a mob of extremists who saw her ideas as a threat to their power. Her story is a stark reminder that intellectual progress has often been met with resistance, even violence. These thinkers had one thing in common. Their ideas were ahead of their time. They were ridiculed, rejected, or even punished while alive. Yet their contributions became the foundation of human advancement. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence represents: change. So what does this mean for modern deep thinkers? Are they destined for loneliness? Not necessarily. Understanding how to navigate a world that often resists deep thought is key. Not everyone is ready for profound conversations, so it's important to share your insights with those who truly appreciate them. You don't need the approval of the majority, just the right people who value your perspective. Seek out like-minded individuals, whether in books, online communities, or intellectual circles. History's greatest thinkers learned how to communicate complex ideas in ways that others could grasp. Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Finding ways to express deep thoughts clearly can help bridge the gap between intelligence and acceptance. Schopenhauer famously said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers perceive the world differently, and that will always unsettle some people. But that doesn't mean they should stop thinking deeply. Society may struggle to embrace deep thinkers, but it needs them to move forward. So if you've ever felt like an outsider because of the way you think, remember, you are not alone. While intelligence can be isolating, it is also what drives progress. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking differently? Share your thoughts below, and let's keep this conversation going. And if you're interested in exploring more insights from history's greatest minds, be sure to subscribe. We're just getting started. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications to stay updated. See you in the next video. Goodbye.